Our final speaker for the symposium today is Professor Harry C. Veryser. In addition to Professor Veryser's teaching duties at the University of Detroit Mercy, he was also a businessman who owned an automotive supply company for many years. Professor Veryser is an associate scholar of the Ludwig von Mises Institute and serves on the advisory boards of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy and the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty. In 2003, he was one of 10 professors in the United States that was selected to receive the Will Herberg Award for Outstanding Faculty Service from the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. His recent book, entitled "It Didn't Have to Be This Way," has become a runaway bestseller. I present to you Professor Harry C. Veryser.
My presentation normally is at the end. I'm kind of the bumper. So it's going to be shorter or longer, but it won't be that long. I want to talk about the whole nature of inflation and deflation. We'll go through a couple of the slides that I've developed. What I normally say to people is, look, there's really 2 or 3 economies going on at the same time. It depends where you are. If your costs are falling, faster than inflation, you're going to benefit. If your costs are rising faster than the inflation rate, you're going to be hurt. And inflation does not affect everybody the same way. Okay? Money is not neutral. As you pump money into the economy, it changes things, but it changes things all over the place, and it's not necessarily predictive of where you'll be. For example, if you get a very good and secure job, and your wages are rising faster than inflation, you'll be okay. In certain periods of the economy, you'll have deflation, where people actually saw deflation of what? The value of their houses fall. And if you were heavy into houses or whatever else, you may be underwater. So when we say economists can't predict, one of the problems with averages is that it doesn't predict for every person the same way. Okay? I'll just go through the process of inflation and explain why, in a sense, the quantitative easing hasn't worked. The process of inflation, and we are basically dealing with fiduciary credit inflation. I doubt whether we're going to go into a fiat money or a runaway inflation. I don't see that on the horizon. But what happens is the Federal Reserve purchases assets. That's how they put money into the economy. They buy bonds, they buy mortgages, they buy things. This money then is injected into the economy, and an increase in bank reserves. But remember, in any inflation, the person who gets the money first is what? Is the most benefited, because they can get the money first before the prices go up. The person who gets the money last is really hurt, because they get the money after the prices have gone up. So remember, this is not a uniform process. Okay, the Fed now puts it into the commercial banking system. And those of you who've had me before in class said what? The banks then will receive interest from the Federal Reserve, and there must be something called willing and able. Now, what is willing and able? Okay, this is the reason why the stimulus package is not working. Because in order for the stimulus package to work, if I filled this room with money and it never got out, it would not affect the price level at all around here. It's only when the money gets out that it starts to affect things. And what makes the money get out? Businessmen and the public borrow the money. You see, it isn't just the fact that we inject money into the system. What it means is the money has to get into circulation, and the only way it gets into circulation through the commercial banking system is to what? To lend it. And on lending, there's 2 people, a lender and a borrower. The lender must be willing and able to lend. And what makes a banker or any investor willing to lend? Profit opportunity. And if you walk into a bank and you have a business plan that doesn't look really that good, and you don't have assets, the banker can't lend to you. On the other hand, and I've been in business, okay, and remember, I would get bawled out by my banker for being too conservative. She said, why don't you borrow some money? I was able to lend. We had a magnificent credit rating, but I didn't see any profit opportunities at that particular point, so why borrow? So this is the holdup. The holdup in our economy is 65% of this economy is small business. Okay, the chances for you to be hired, and I know a lot of you are graduating and you're looking to pay off those awful student loans, and you want to get hired, your chance is 65% you're going to work for a small, medium-sized, or startup company. That's stalled right now. That's the engine that has to get going. The big companies are not the engine that drives the economy. It's the small companies, and it's right here where business and the public are stalled. Okay? Now, the other thing that happens is we're seeing a distortion in the income figures. Mises predicts everything that's done by government against the purchasing power of the unit under present conditions is done against the middle class and the working class. In other words, the middle class and working class, they don't have the financial muscle power to be able to do what? To raise their prices in the wake of inflation. So in a sense, they are being hurt. And if we take a look at the statistics that are coming out, we see what's happened since 1971. I always like to use 1971 because that was the breakup of Bretton Woods. A defective, but at least some kind of breaks. And we see what's happened here is since 71, there's been a consistent rise in the top 10 and the top 25%. Why? They're first in line. Okay, look what's happened, and this, by the way, comes from, of all places, Mother Jones Magazine, but that's the Census Bureau. Notice that the second, third, fourth income levels have declined, okay, since 71, and that is definitely the result of inflation. In other words, they're at the end of the line as the money's coming out. Now, David Stockman has a good book. I wish he would have footnoted it. But he explains the process by which this goes on. That's why New York, Washington, various other areas are becoming wealthy, while the rest of the country is stagnant. And it's because of the inflation that's gone on. Okay, something that a pair of shoes, I used to be able to buy a pair of really good Florsheim leather shoes, 1971, about 25 or 30 bucks. The same shoe costs what? About $200, $250 today. And if you go back to bls.gov, it'll show you the inflation factor. So we've had mild inflation, but inflation over a long period of time, and it's had this effect. Okay, notice the average household income. This also shows the changes in income. This is from the Congressional Budget Office. Pretty much says the same thing. Before taxes, the upper income, and these are basically people in finance, and in other areas where the rest has been stagnant. Now, what is government spending the money on? We say this. Why is it that most of the taxes are being paid by the upper income people in the country? Taxes tell the story. They're the ones who are making the money, and therefore their tax returns show it, and they're carrying a bigger burden of the process of government, where the ones of us, we're not making as much money, our tax returns are not going in. Okay, medium adjusted household income, and cui bono, a good Latin term for who's good. If you see the real adjusted income, and you can see the levels down here, again, relatively flat. Again, at the upper levels, the people who are first in line are doing much better. Okay? Now, where the money comes out, it tends to raise prices in that area. So if we see, just take a look at what's gone up. The bottom line, this line here, this is the average CPI index. Look at what's happened in education. The cost of education has gone up much faster than the CPI. Why? Because of the federal subsidies, the printed money going into education has pushed up the cost. Okay, I gave a recent talk at Central Michigan University, and one of the professors of the department came up and he said, Harry, how many more students do you think we had since 1971? Well, 42%. How many more professors? 42%. How many more bureaucrats? 636%. Okay, what's happening is as this grant money comes in, it's being pushed into certain areas, and the administrative costs are rising significantly. And guess who bears that? Okay? What the government says, and I am one of the ones who are in absolute protest against this. And what happens is they say, look, you don't have to worry about it. You can borrow the money. When I graduated from college and I went to all private universities, I walked out of college with zero debt. That was the period before the breakup of the gold standard. None of my classmates who graduated from U of D, very few of them had student debt because we didn't have student loans. So the university had to compete. Now the student walks in and, my gosh, $50,000 or whatever it is a year, not here, but other places. Oh, well, that's all right, borrow the money. You see? And so what's happening is this is pushing it up. Notice the other thing it pushes up, listed property. As this inflation is coming out, what's it pushing up? It's pushing up the prices of real estate, particularly in certain areas where that is going on. If we take a look at the second one, we can say student loans financed by government. Okay, notice, as the student loans financed by government have increased, what's happened to the cost of education? Cost of education has gone up. What drove the housing price market? What drove the prices of these houses up was what? Was the lowering of reserve requirements. Therefore, the money went into real estate and did what? It created a bubble. Wherever that happens, you're going to have a bubble. This just happens to be education. I love that word, eduflation. That's a good term. Okay? Look at compare the prices. What else has government poured money into? Even before Obamacare. Medical care. 50% of the bills, of the medical bills today are paid by government. So as that money goes into that, that's going to push it up. Notice here, all items, 3.9% a year, medical care, 6%, textbook, 6.9%, average college tuition, 7.74%. I can tell you when I teach a class, I tell the kids, look, just buy any edition of the book. They're all the same, okay? And most of my students can get the book for about 25 or 30 cents rather than $200 or $300. Okay, so I have a sympathy with you. I want you to graduate like I did with zero debt. Okay, notice if you just take a look at this is the inflation. Remember, inflation is different. The price of gasoline is going to be different than the price of a doctor's visit because that's where the money is coming out. Housing prices lag behind, but college tuition and fees, educational books and supplies have gone up significantly. Okay, what about the stock market? Notice, okay, the margin debt. Now, margin debt is the money that people borrow to put into the stock market. Okay, notice what's happened. From this time on, we start talking about the money available, and as the margin debt has increased, what's also happened to the S&P? People are borrowing money, putting it into the stock market, leveraging it, and it is actually inflating the stock prices much faster than the normal price of consumer goods. Okay, so compare prices. Okay, stocks, another indication of the same thing. Now, the deflation trap. Where is the USA now? Notice there are two types of deflation. There's the good type. When Henry Ford produced the automobile, he brought the price down because of increasing productivity. The good type, every time you go to Best Buy to buy a computer, guess what happens? The price falls. Why? Increasing productivity. So as we have increasing productivity, it tends to bring prices down. As we go, we'll go a little bit faster because I know you're kind of anxious and probably hungry. Deflation proper has been as a result of credit over expansion. There is no deflation until there's inflation first. Inflation distorts things in the economy, and then you get to deflation. So you have to get up on top of the building before you fall off, as it were. If there were no inflation, you wouldn't have that. My colleagues have talked about the housing crisis, the bubble in Japan, most tied to real estate under the government loans, etc., and the new money pushes up the prices. One of my colleagues has actually traced, he calls it the the skyscraper indicator. And he says every time you see large skyscrapers built, and he has this, I traced it, generally it presages that there will be a recession of sorts. Okay, and it builds the debt pyramid. Now, this will be my last slide and I'll let you go. The process of deflation, businesses and the public are unable to service the debt. What brought the deflation in house prices? The people couldn't service the debt. They couldn't pay off the mortgage. Banks were then faced with collapsing revenues. Deflation happens in the banking cycle. The bank's portfolios begin to shrink. They begin to tighten up. Business activity falls, prices fall, interest rates fall due to lack of demand. Debtors are embarrassed by falling income and high debt levels. Always remember this, folks, when you're in business. You can lay off the workers. You cannot lay off the mortgage. You might lose your job, you don't lose your mortgage. And that's why deflation is so deleterious in an economy. Because suddenly the mortgage that you borrowed at these high prices, you now have to pay back at low income. And this is one of the things that's stalling the economy now as we wash this out. So as we go through this, we go through the various parts of and there are ways out. I'll save that for another lecture. And if we went back to sound money or gold, we could pull this thing out relatively quickly. Okay, this is just a chart. Had we been on the gold standard in 1979, our national debt would be far lower because we wouldn't be paying the high interest rates. But that's maybe for, if you come back in October, I can go through that, okay? So I'll just do that's the last slide, The Power of Gold and Sound Money. So thank you very much. I have books available. I'd be glad to go through it. I don't know, we're supposed to be out of here, but I'll be around here if you want to ask me any questions, etc. Thank you very much.